Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our live coding series where we learn how to write React applications using the ReasonML programming language. In this fifth and last episode, we are going to see how we can do routing in our Reason React application, and we are also going to see how we can communicate with existing JavaScript components or code in general. So we are going to see how we can use code that is written in JavaScript and use that code inside of our Reason code base. So this is what we are going to do in this episode. So the first thing to know is that in Reason and with Reason React, we do not actually need a library to do routing. The routing actually comes with the Reason React itself. And we're going to see how we're going to do that right about now. So let's just make sure that we have the compiler running. We have our development server running. For you guys to be able to follow with me, I'm going to share with you the repo for this fifth episode. You can see it here with the tag episode 5. So I'm going to share that with you here. So I will send it in a comment. And now we can start writing some code. So let's open our file called app.re, which is our main file. And let's go to our main component, which is the component that displays our list of to-dos. So in this component, this is what we saw in the previous episode. And what we want to do now is to get the URL. So what we are going to do is type a let URL equals reason react router dot use URL. So now we get this URL record, and we can see in the documentation what that means. It's just a record, or you can think of it as a JavaScript object. It returns a path, which is the path that we have here in the web bar. So this is what we get here. It's for example, when we have /book/title/edit, it returns it into a string like this. It contains a list that gets book, title, and edit. It also returns the hash symbol if we ever want to use that, and it returns the query params in the search string. So you can look at the documentation. Everything is really well explained there. So now that we have our URL object, what we can do is use a switch expression. And this is one of the things that you cannot or you cannot really use with regular JavaScript code, which is writing a real switch expression. We do not need any library or any switch component or anything like that. So we switch over the URL.path. So if it returns an empty list, that means we are at the root, at the root of our application. So let's say when we are at the root of our application, let's just return this. So we return the main view that we have here. And let's say, for example, if we have the about page, for example, where when we are in the about URL, we will just return a div that says inside of it a React string, okay, that says this is the about page. Okay, so as you can see here, the compiler is actually warning us because there are some URLs that we did not account for, so that we need to account for. and that means adding a catch-all case, which it catches everything that is not an empty list and that is not about, and it will return just a string that says not found. Not found. And we can go and test that actually in our app. So let's go to our app and go to the about page, and it says here this is the about page, and when we go to the root URL we actually get our to-do list. So this is quite good, and what we would like to do now is display the possible routes here just below the title and be able to navigate from within our application. So what we can do now is go to our header component. So here is our header component. What we want to do is wrap our title in a div, and then add another div that will contain two spans. First will say, will be the string that's called home, and we will add another one which will be called about. We will also need to fix the styling a little bit. So yes, so we will need to change this to be a flex column, and we will need to align the items to the center. What we can do also here, add a class name with a text being base. Let's see what that gives us. So okay, so it's almost right. We will need just to add some margins. So we will add a margin here, class name, so margin right 2, and here add some margin to the left. It will be margin left of 2. Let's have a look at that, and it should be working just fine. Okay, so we have the home and the about spans right here. So what we want to do is add some click listener, so that when we click on the home or on the about word, we are going to change our routing and navigate to the route that we want to navigate to. So what we can do here is add an on click listener, and what this will be, it will be a function that takes some event that we do not care about, and what returns a reason react router dot push. So for the home or the root URL, we're just going to push for the root URL, and we can also do the same thing and change the root URL to the about page. What we can also do, just to improve the user experience a little bit, is change the cursor to be a pointer. We're going to do the same thing here. It will be a cursor pointer, and we can see what happens when this compiles. So we are in the home page. Once we click on the about, we navigate to the about page. We click on home, we go back to the home page. Okay, so now what we want to do is to display a little underline under the current page. So what we will need to do is actually get the current URL in the props of our header. So it will be, let's call it route, for example, or let's call it path, right? Path, which will be a list of of strings, which is the type of the path. I do not need to write this type annotation. I'm just writing it because I want to remind myself that this is a list of strings. So what I can do here is just add a small ternary expression. Is going to be if the path equals the empty list, then I'm going to return the underlined style. Otherwise, I just don't return anything. What I can do is copy, paste, margin left. And now what we're going to see, if the path is the about page, then I return the underline. Otherwise, I do not underline anything. And when we are in the not found page, then nothing will be underlined. So, okay, so this is not compiling because we need to give our header the path that we have here. So it will be the path equals URL dot path, and now it is compiling, and we should be able to see the changes that we have here. So this is our home page. So we have the home underlined. When we go to the about page, we have the about underlined, and when we go to some undefined page, we just get the not found page here, as we are going to see. So not found, and nothing is underlined, and let's go back to our home. Okay. So just like this, we implemented routing, and we can now do routing in our Reason React applications. And what we will see now, and what we will do, is actually use a already existent JavaScript code that we have in this repo. Okay, so in this repo, I have a JavaScript component that I call JS component. And as you can see here, it's called JS component.jsx. So this is just your regular JavaScript. I am exporting a blue div component that just takes children's and wrap them into a blue div. So this is what we are going to use. If we have some time, we will also show how we can bind to this add function and use it also inside of our Reason code. So let's go back to our Reason code where we bind to this blue div and use it inside of our Reason code. So just like we are used to when we want to create a new a React component. So when we want to write a new React component in Reason, we write a new module. So this will be a module, and let's call it blue div. We can call it whatever we want. We can call it anything we want. We do not need to call it blue div. So this is going to be react.component. Nothing new here. We have the let make equals, and we are going to see what we are going to do for our make function. So the first thing that we want to do is actually bind to the actual JavaScript module, and we can do that using this annotation called bs.module, and then we look for our module, which is js-component.jsx. And here, instead of actually using the let binding, or instead of using the let keyword, we are going to use the external keyword. So this is going to be external, and instead of writing the equal sign, we are going to write the type annotation of this component, so we can use this component safely inside of our Reason code. So when we want to write some code that comes from JavaScript, we should write some type annotations so that we make the usage of our of the JavaScript code safer than just using it however we want to. So make is a function that takes some children, which are so the children are a React element. And what this function returns, it's a component, so it just returns another element, and the name of the components that we want to bind to is called blue div. So this is our blue div, and this is compiling. And now, just like that, we can use the blue div component inside of our Reason React code. So what we can do is go to this about page, and instead of just using this usual div, we can use this blue div and also use this blue div here. And we are going to see what that's going to give us in our code or in our page. So we go to the about page, and as you can see here, this is a blue page because we use the blue div component from our JavaScript code. And this is so important because, or especially when you want to migrate or start using Reason code inside of your already big React application, you can start by just writing some small component in Reason and keep using your JavaScript code and start migrating slowly and component by component. And this is actually the strategy that Messenger.com used to migrate to Reason. And now the Messenger.com website is actually 100% written in Reason code. You will also see some parts of Facebook written in Reason code. And this is the strategy of adoption that they used. So now that we saw how we can bind to a React component, we are going to see how we can bind to how we can use a JavaScript regular function without it being necessarily a React component. So let's go back to our blue div here, for example. And what we can do, or we don't even need to write it inside of our blue div, let's just write it in here. So what we can do, just like we did with our component, we use we look for the module, which is in this case JS component.jsx. And I think it's also worth mentioning that this technique works with any kind of JavaScript modules. So it can be, for example, you can bind to your material UI component. You can bind to any existing JavaScript code. To bind, for example, to a material component, you can, for example, just use @material UI, and then / the component that you want to use inside of your Reason React application. So now let's just use our JavaScript or our add component. So we can use this JS component, and just like that, use the external keyword. We do not need the React component annotation here because we are just going to use a normal JavaScript function. So this is going to be called add. It will take 2 integers and return a third integer. And the name of the function that we are going to be binding to will be called add. So now that we bind to our add function, what we can do here, for example, is use our function. Let's do, for example, let x equals add 2 and 3. And now what we can do is log the x. So we can do js.log x, and we should hopefully see the 5 show up in our console. So let's go to our console, open the console, check out the logs, and as you can see here, it's showing this 5, which is the 3 + 2 that we just used in our that comes from the JavaScript file, but that we used inside of the Reason file, actually. So this is all we are going to learn in this episode. I'm just going to do a quick summary of what we saw in this live coding series. In the first episode, we talked a little bit about why you would want to use Reason, what is this language, a little bit of the history. We also saw how we can set up our development environment. In the second episode, we saw how we can write a static React application or a static page by just displaying the data that we have. In the third episode, we added some reactivity. We used the use reducer React hook to add the reactivity and change the states of our app. In the fourth episode, we saw how we can communicate with an external API. So we were getting the data from as JSON from an API. We saw how we did the parsing and the validation of the JSON. We saw why that was really important, and why that really helps us getting rid of bugs and saving us from bumping into bugs. And the last thing that we saw today is how we can do routing in our Reason React application, and how we can use existing JavaScript code inside of our Reason React application. So with that, I hope that you guys learned or can now at least get started with using this amazing language, with the amazing framework that is React. So I hope you guys can get started and start using this language. Thank you guys for checking in this stream and this live coding series. Thank you guys, and see ya. Bye.